It was almost midnight when Jack Miller pulled his old Harley beside pump number 4 at a quiet gas station off Route 76. The air was crisp, carrying that late autumn chill that settled deep into the bones. Jack was 61, weathered but steady, the kind of man who wore his years like patches on his vest, earned, not given. His fingers were stiff from the ride, but he moved with the calm of someone who'd seen a lot and was rarely surprised anymore. As the pump clicked to life and the smell of gasoline filled the air, he heard something that didn't belong. Soft at first, barely audible over the hum of the street light and the quiet hiss of fuel, a sound of someone crying. He looked over. One pump away stood a young woman, barely into her 20s, shoulders hunched against the cold, holding a small pile of coins in her shaking hands. Her name, he learned later, was Emily. She was trying to count, but the quarters and dimes kept slipping through her fingers, clinking onto the concrete. Her eyes were red, her face pale and streaked with tears. She held herself like someone trying to disappear. Jack watched quietly for a few seconds, then turned off his pump and walked over without a word. He didn't ask if she needed help. He didn't wait for her to explain. He simply slid his credit card into her pump and started filling her tank. The girl spun toward him, startled. "Please," she said, grabbing his arm. "Please don't do this. You don't understand. I can't let you do this." Her voice cracked as she whispered, "He'll find out."
Jack didn't say much, just nodded and answered softly, "It's already going, sweetheart." That's how it started. Not with a fight, not with a scream. Just a simple act. A full tank of gas and a girl counting coins she never expected to spend. But Jack knew this wasn't about gas. This was something else, something deeper. He had seen it before. The kind of fear that didn't come from being broke, but from being trapped. And in that moment, Jack understood he wasn't just filling up a tank. He was stepping into someone's story. Emily's grip on Jack's arm tightened as she whispered again, this time with urgency buried in fear. "Please, you have to stop. He'll think I asked for it." Her voice came out in pieces, like someone trying to speak while holding back a scream. Jack looked down at her. She couldn't have been more than 22, her face barely lit by the flickering overhead light, and her eyes constantly shifting toward the gas station store behind them. "He's inside getting cigarettes," she muttered, barely audible. "If he sees you helping me, he'll think I planned it. She didn't finish the sentence, but Jack understood. He had seen it before. The look in her eyes wasn't just fear, it was survival. Jack kept his voice calm. "How much does he usually let you put in?" he asked. Emily looked away, embarrassed. "Whatever these coins get, maybe half a gallon, just enough to get home." "Where's home?" "About 40 miles west. My mom's place. I haven't seen her in months." The pump kept running. Jack watched the numbers climb, $10, then $20. Emily saw them too, and her panic only grew. "Oh, God," she said under her breath, taking a shaky step back. "He's gonna lose it. He's gonna think I'm trying to leave." Jack turned slightly to shield her from the store window. "He doesn't let you fill up?" he asked, though the answer was clear. "He says I don't need to. Says I only get gas when he says so. I get a few bucks here and there. Keeps me from going too far." Jack nodded slowly, eyes still on the pump. It passed $30. "You planning to leave tonight?" he asked. Emily hesitated. Her voice was almost gone. "I was gonna try, but I only had $3. I figured I'd get to the next town and, I don't know, hope." Hope. That word hung in the air like a breath caught in the throat. Jack looked at her again, really looked. The faded bruises on her forearms were half hidden under her sweatshirt sleeves. Her right wrist looked swollen, and there was something else, an exhaustion in her body that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from carrying fear for too long. "You ever think you don't deserve this?" Jack asked gently. Emily's eyes welled up again. She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. The pump clicked off. $42. A full tank. Emily looked at the number as if it were a death sentence. "He's going to kill me! Why did you do that?" Jack didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled the nozzle out and put it back on the hook. "Because I saw someone who needed help," he said. "But now you've made it worse," she said, voice shaking. "He's going to think I asked for it. He's going to think I'm leaving. He told me if I ever tried—" The sentence hung there, unfinished, but the weight of it pressed down on both of them. Jack put a hand on the seat of her car, then turned to face her. "I'm not leaving you here." "You have to," Emily said quickly. "Please, just go, before he comes out, please." But Jack had already made up his mind. He'd been around too long, seen too many girls with that same look, the look of someone who wasn't sure they'd make it through the night. He couldn't ride away, not this time. Then she froze, her breath caught in her throat, her whole body going still, like prey sensing a predator. "He's coming," she whispered. Jack turned to look toward the store. That's when everything changed. The gas station door swung open with a dull chime as a tall figure stepped out into the night. Chad was in his mid-20s, lean but muscular, wearing a sleeveless shirt that showed off faded prison tattoos on both arms. He moved with the swagger of someone used to being in control, and the moment he saw Emily standing next to Jack, his expression turned cold and dangerous. Jack felt Emily tense up beside him. Her hands instinctively moved to her sleeves, tugging them down over her bruises. Chad walked straight toward them, his voice sharp and loud enough to echo off the pumps. "What the hell is this?" he barked. Emily stepped back, her voice small. "I didn't ask him. He just—" Chad cut her off. "I leave you alone for 5 minutes, and this is what I come back to, begging old men for gas money?" Jack stood calm but firm. "She didn't beg me for anything," he said. "I filled her tank because she needed it." Chad ignored him, stepping closer to Emily until they were nearly nose to nose. "You think I'm stupid?" he snarled. "Nobody fills up someone's car unless they're trying to get something. So what did you offer him?" That's when Jack stepped in. Not violently, not yet, just a step forward, placing himself between Emily and the man who was supposed to care for her. "Back off," Jack said, voice low and steady. "Huh, mind your business, old man. She's coming with me." Jack didn't move. "I don't think she wants to go."
"She's my girlfriend," Chad said, jaw tight. "Not your damn business."
Jack looked at Emily. Her eyes were wide, glassy, filled with panic and shame. "Emily," he said gently, "do you feel safe with him?" "She's fine," Chad snapped, but Emily didn't say a word. She just wrapped her arms around herself, retreating inward like she had 1,000 times before. Jack didn't take his eyes off her. "Emily," he repeated, "do you want to get in that car with him?" There was a long silence. Then, barely louder than the breeze, she whispered 2 words that shattered the tension like glass. "Help me." Chad's face twisted in rage. "You little—" he shouted as he lunged toward Jack with a clenched fist. But Jack had been ready. At 61, he might have moved slower than he used to, but 20 years working construction and over 40 decades riding with brothers had kept him strong. He caught Chad's wrist mid-swing and twisted it behind his back, slamming him gently but firmly against the hood of Emily's car. Chad struggled, cursing, but Jack held him steady. "Let me go!" Chad yelled. "This is assault! Someone call the cops!" He leaned in close. "Great idea,"
he said evenly. Let's show them the bruises on her arms while we're at it. From across the lot, someone had already done just that. A bystander had witnessed the whole thing and made the call. Sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder. Jack loosened his grip just slightly as the flashing red and blue lights came into view. Chad was still shouting threats, but his voice started to shake. Emily stood a few steps behind them, frozen in place, hands over her mouth. Her eyes locked on to the flashing lights like they were the first sign of hope she'd seen in months. For Jack, there was no victory in this moment, no pride, just the quiet knowledge that he'd made the right choice not to walk away.
Within moments, the police cruisers rolled into the gas station, their lights reflecting off the glass windows and the polished metal of Jack's Harley. The first officer stepped out, one hand on his holster for caution, and spoke firmly. "Sir, release him and step back." Jack did exactly that, letting go of Chad and raising both hands slightly to show he wasn't looking for trouble. Chad immediately took the opportunity to point and shout, "That guy attacked me! I want him arrested! He assaulted me for no reason!" The officer turned toward Chad, studying him while his partner approached Emily. She had sunk down onto the curb, tears still streaming silently as she tried to keep her breathing steady. The female officer knelt beside her. "Ma'am, do you need medical attention?" she asked gently. Emily shook her head, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. "I just want to go home," she whispered. "To my mom. In Nebraska." The first officer asked Jack what happened. Jack's voice remained calm. "I stopped him from grabbing her. She was scared and she asked for help." Emily heard the words and looked up, as if trying to decide whether she really deserved someone defending her like that. The female officer noticed the faded bruises on her arms and wrist. She asked quietly, "Did he do this to you?" Emily nodded, small and ashamed, like she felt responsible for his violence. The officer reassured her, "You're safe now. You did the right thing." Meanwhile, the first officer stepped back, speaking into his radio. A minute later, he returned with a different tone in his voice. "We have 2 active warrants for his arrest, one in Missouri for a domestic violence charge and another in Kansas for failure to appear in court." Chad's confidence crumbled instantly. The bravado vanished as he tried to argue that it was all just a misunderstanding, but the handcuffs were already clicking shut around his wrists. The officers escorted him to the cruiser as he yelled threats over his shoulder, his voice muffled once the door closed.
Emily instinctively flinched at his shouting, even though he was locked inside a squad car now, separated from her by layers of steel and law. The female officer stayed beside Emily, speaking quietly and with care. She described a local organization that helped people in situations like hers. They were trained to give support, protection, and guidance. Emily listened, taking slow breaths, trying to process the idea that help actually existed. Jack stepped forward, but kept his distance enough not to overwhelm her. "You're going to be all right," he said softly. Emily glanced at him, her eyes lost and searching. "He never gave me more than $3 at a time," she said. "He said if I had money, I'd try to escape. I only got gas when he approved it. I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone. Tonight, I was finally going to try, but I only had $3. I didn't think I'd make it far enough." Jack reached for his wallet. He opened it and took out a stack of bills. "This is for you," he said, placing the money gently in her hands. "I want you to use it to get home safely." Emily stared at the cash as if it were unreal, like something she was not allowed to touch. "I can't take this," she protested. Jack replied, "You can, and you will. You don't owe me a thing. Just remember the moment someone else needs help someday." The advocate from the Domestic Support Center arrived shortly after. She carried a calm confidence, offering Emily a warm blanket and a voice that sounded like safety. Emily stood up slowly, her body tired, her heart overwhelmed. She hugged Jack once, tightly, as though she needed to hold on to the moment just a little longer. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely more than breath. "You gave me a chance I never thought I'd get." Jack nodded, not needing any more words. He watched as Emily was escorted into a car that would take her somewhere safe, somewhere she could breathe again, somewhere she could finally rest.
A statistic floated through Jack's mind, something he had once heard but never forgotten. In the United States, more than 1 in every 4 women experiences intimate partner violence at some point in her life. Too many people look away. Too many pretend they didn't see what was right in front of them. But not tonight. Tonight, Jack had chosen to stay. Tonight, he made sure Emily could leave. And as the police cars drove off and the parking lot grew quiet again, Jack stood silently beside his motorcycle, hands shaking not from fear, but from anger at the world that allowed this kind of hurt to happen. Yet underneath the anger, there was something else. Hope. 2 weeks passed before Jack picked up the phone and called the shelter. He hadn't stopped thinking about the girl at the gas station, not once. The advocate on the other end of the line recognized his voice right away. "She made it home," she said. "Back to her mom in Nebraska. And she left something here for you." A few days later, Jack rode back to the shelter and was handed an envelope with his name carefully written across the front. Inside was a handwritten letter. The paper was lined and folded neatly as if the words on it had been written and rewritten more than once. It began simply, "Dear Mr. Jack, I'm safe. I'm home. Because of you." Emily told him about how she'd enrolled in a local community college, studying social work. She wanted to help women like herself, those who didn't know they were allowed to ask for help. "She's learning what freedom feels like," she wrote. "It's not just distance. It's knowing you're not trapped anymore. I never thought someone like you would be the reason I get to dream again. But you are." 3 years later, Jack still keeps that letter in his wallet. It's folded and worn at the edges now, but the words haven't faded. From time to time, he receives an email from Emily. Updates, milestones, moments. Last month, she sent him a photo standing next to a used silver sedan. She bought it herself, with her first paycheck from the shelter where she now works full-time.
She wrote, "I keep the tank full, always. It reminds me that I can leave whenever I need to, that I'm free. And it started the night you filled it for me." Chad, the man who tried to control her life, was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Multiple charges, multiple states. He won't be hurting anyone for a long time. But that part of the story isn't what Jack remembers most. What stays with him is that moment at the pump, when a scared girl whispered, "Help me," and he listened. It was one question that changed everything. Not a punch, not a threat, just a question. Do you feel safe? It's the question Jack asks himself every time he sees someone in trouble. And it's the question he teaches younger riders in his club to ask too. His club, Redemption Crew, doesn't just ride for the wind and the roads. They ride for people who need someone to step up when no one else will. Because real bikers protect. Real bikers notice. They stand in the space between fear and freedom, between silence and a voice. That night at the gas station, Jack didn't set out to be a hero. He just did what was right. But that one small act, $42 in gas and $300 in emergency cash, gave a young woman the fuel she needed to start over. And now every woman Emily helps is part of that same legacy. One full tank at a time. One brave whisper at a time. One life changed at a time. So if you believe bikers are more than what the world assumes, if you believe that kindness, strength, and courage still matter, then hit that like button, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the loudest kind of love is the quiet act of refusing to walk away.